Everything you know about vampires is wrong. The castle, the cape, the Transylvanian accent, the coffin in the basement. Wrong, 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 and wrong. Vampires do not come from Romania. They do not come from Eastern Europe. They do not come from anywhere near Bram Stoker's imagination. They come from India. And the story of how a creature born in ancient India ended up being sold to the world as a Romanian nobleman in a cape is one of the most fascinating and most overlooked stories in the history of human mythology. In this video, we follow the trail from the oldest vampiric entity ever documented through the people who carried it across the entire continent to the moment one novel erased thousands of years of real history. Buckle up, Echoes Obscura. The dark has a story and I tell it. The oldest monster. Vampires don't come from Transylvania. They come from India, and I can prove it. The Vetala is a vampiric entity documented in Indian texts going back to the 11th century, appearing in a collection of stories called the birthplace, which translates to 25 Tales of Vetala. 4 centuries before Dracula, 4 centuries before the Strigoi, and 4 centuries before anyone in Romania had coined a word for the thing that drinks blood in the dark. India already had one. The Vetala possesses corpses, hangs upside down from trees inside dead bodies. It is intelligent, ancient, and it operates according to a set of rules and behaviors that map almost perfectly onto what we now call vampire mythology. Not similar, not adjacent. The same creature, born in India. Documented writing centuries before Europe had a name for it. The oldest vampire in recorded history is not European. It never was. Before the Vetala, the original vampires were Indians. And here's what makes it even deeper. The Vetala was never even the beginning. India had vampiric entities long before the 11th century. The written record just starts there. The Pishacha appears in the Sanskrit texts that predate the birthplace by centuries, a flesh-consuming demon that haunts cremation grounds and possesses the living, draining life force, spreads madness and disease. The Rakshasa, documented in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, 2 of the oldest written texts in human history, is a shape-shifting predatory being that feeds on human blood and can take the form of anyone it chooses. They are not vampire-adjacent creatures. These are vampires. Thousands of years old, fully formed, operating with the same hunger, the same abilities, and the same weaknesses that would later define the vampire myth across the entire world. The vampire story does not start in a Transylvanian castle. It starts in ancient India, thousands of years before Romania existed. The people who carried it. I have a Romanian passport. I can say right? Maybe not. A lot of Americans think that the Romani are just hippies who don't shower. This is incorrect. Let me explain who they actually are and why it matters more than almost anything in this vampire story. The Romani people originated in northwestern India, specifically the Punjab and Rajasthan region. Genetic studies, linguistic analysis, historical documentation. This is not disputed. Beginning around the 10th and 11th centuries, the same period the Vetala is being documented in Indian texts, the Romani began a westward migration that would eventually carry them across Persia, the Middle East, North Africa, and into Europe. They carried their language, their music, their tradition, their stories, and their understanding of the creature that lived in the dark. The Romani are not a mystery people of unknown origin. They are Indians, specifically Northern Indians, who left home over 1,000 years ago and never stopped moving. And they brought something with them. The trail. Every country the Romani passed through on their way to Europe developed its own vampire myth. That is not a coincidence. It is a trail. Follow the migration route. Persia. The Vetala equivalent appears in Persian folklore as a blood-drinking demon haunting edges of civilization. The Middle East, the Ekimu and the Utuku, ancient Mesopotamian blood-draining spirits that predate even the Romani migration, but get amplified and reshaped as new stories arrive from the East. The Balkans, the Vrikolakas in Greece, the Kurvopijak in Bulgaria, the Mulo among the Romani themselves, a vampiric spirit of the restless dead. Each culture, each creature, each one appearing along the exact corridor, 1,000-mile trail of vampire mythology stretching from northwestern India to the edge of Western Europe. The creatures did not evolve independently. They were carried. Deliberately or not, they traveled with the people. What changed along the way? The vampire that left India and the vampire that arrived in Europe were not the same creature. Something happened along the way. And understanding what changed tells exactly whose hands it passed through. The original Indian vampiric entities, the Vetala, the Pishacha, the Rakshasa, are primarily spiritual. They operate in the space between life and death. They possess, they drain life force. They're tied to improper burial or unresolved souls. As the mythology moves westward through Persia and the Middle East, the physical elements intensify. The blood drinking becomes more literal. The corpse rising from the grave becomes more central. By the time the creature reaches the Balkans, it is almost entirely physical. A body rising, drinking blood, destroyed by specific physical means. The spiritual creature of ancient India transformed mile by mile into the physical predator of Eastern Europe. Same hunger, different body. The journey changed it. Just like it changes everything that travels far enough from home. And Romania gets the credit. The Strigoi, Romania's vampire, documented from around the 15th century, over 400 years after the Vetala was already written down in India. And somehow, Romania gets to be the home of the vampire. Let me explain how that happened. The Strigoi is a genuine and deeply rooted piece of Romanian folklore. This is not fabrication. The fear of the restless dead rising to drain the living is real, ancient within the Romanian culture. But it is not the origin. It is the destination. Romanian vampire mythology sits at the western end of a migration corridor that stretches back over 1,000 years and thousands of miles to northwestern India. The Strigoi is what vampire became after passing through Persian hands, Arab hands, Greek hands, Balkan hands. It is the final form of a creature that started its journey in ancient India. Romania did not create the vampire. Romania inherited it. How Dracula buried everything. The Romani carried the vampire into Europe. 1,000 years of migration, 1,000 years of cultural transmission, and then in 1897, one Irish writer sitting in a London library wrote one novel and buried all of it under fiction and tourism. Bram Stoker did not know about the Vetala, did not know about the Romani migration, did not know about the 1,000-year trail of vampiric mythology stretching from India to Eastern Europe. He found a footnote, a name, Dracula, and he built a castle around it. The novel became a phenomenon. The castle became a tourist destination. Romania became the undisputed home of the vampire in the global imagination. And India, where the story actually started, disappeared from the conversation entirely. The Romani people who carried the myth across a continent got reduced to background color in Stoker's novel. Mysterious travelers, exotic locals, supporting characters in their own story. This is not history. That is erasure. I asked ChatGPT to check if the vampires originate from India. Here's what ChatGPT said. The evidence is not circumstantial. It is documentary, genetic, linguistic, and geographic. And it points in one direction. The vampire may have been born far from Transylvania. Long before Dracula, India had the Vetala, a dead thing that slid into corpses and haunted burial grounds. This is what I said. Then the Romani, whose roots trace back to India, moved west, and maybe they carried the story with them. Across Persia, the Balkans, and Eastern Europe, the legend changed. The corpse spirit became hungry, blood replaced whispers. The grave became a door. By the time Europe named it vampire, the monster was already old. Not proven, but possible. Maybe India gave it the corpse. Maybe Europe gave it the fangs. I would call it very plausible, maybe 70% true. There you go. ChatGPT kinda agrees with my theory. How about you? Subscribe to Echoes Obscura, follow on every platform. The dark has a story, and I tell it. See you in the next one. Adios.